In the Garden of Eden, everything was perfect. Adam and Eve lived in harmony with all of creation, walking each day in the presence of God, surrounded by the beauty of the trees, rivers, and animals. But amidst this perfection, a shadow lurked, one that neither Adam nor Eve could see or understand. Among the creatures that roamed the garden, there was one more cunning than all the others, the serpent. This creature was not like the other animals Adam and Eve had named and tended to. It was sly, and within it harbored a dark intent. The serpent had been watching, biding its time, waiting for the right moment to act. It knew of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it knew that God had forbidden Adam and Eve to eat from it. The serpent understood that within the fruit of that tree lay the power to change everything, to bring the knowledge of good and evil into their innocent minds and, with it, the burden of sin and shame. And so, one day, as Eve wandered through the garden, admiring the beauty around her, the serpent slithered silently up to her. Its scales gleamed in the dappled sunlight, and its voice, when it spoke, was soft and smooth, full of cunning. "Did God really say," the serpent asked, "that you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" Eve turned to the serpent, surprised that one of the animals was speaking to her. But she answered it honestly. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," she said, "but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." The serpent's eyes gleamed with a mixture of malice and craftiness. "You will not surely die," it said in a whisper, its words dripping with deception. "For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve hesitated, her eyes drawn toward the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent's words lingered in her mind, creating a strange curiosity and doubt. Could it be true? Could this tree, which God had forbidden them to touch, really hold the power to make them like God, to give them knowledge they had never known before? Eve stood before the tree, her heart conflicted. She gazed at the fruit, and as she did, it began to look more appealing. The fruit was beautiful, rich in color, perfect in shape, and it seemed to beckon her, promising wisdom and knowledge. Her thoughts raced. What could be so dangerous about this fruit? Why had God forbidden it? If the serpent was right, then perhaps God was withholding something from them, something wonderful. Her curiosity grew stronger. The serpent's words echoed in her mind, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." It wasn't just about the fruit anymore, it was about the desire to know more, to have what was forbidden, to grasp something beyond what she had been given. Slowly, Eve reached out her hand. Her fingers brushed the smooth skin of the fruit, and as she grasped it, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with a twinge of fear. With one final look at the fruit, she brought it to her lips and took a bite. The taste was sweet, yet as the fruit's juice filled her mouth, something shifted within her. Her eyes widened, and her heart quickened as new thoughts flooded her mind, thoughts she had never had before. Knowledge of good and evil, of right and wrong, filled her. She suddenly felt a sense of vulnerability, a strange awareness of herself that she had never experienced in the perfect innocence of Eden. Without thinking, Eve turned to Adam, who had been nearby, and offered him the fruit. Adam looked at her, then at the fruit in her hand. He saw the change in her eyes, the newfound awareness that seemed to have altered her. Conflicted, yet trusting his companion, Adam took the fruit from her hand and, without a word, ate it as well. In an instant, everything changed. As soon as Adam swallowed the fruit, a wave of realization swept over him. His eyes were opened, just as the serpent had said, but it was not the glorious knowledge he had hoped for. Instead, it was a painful awareness, a knowledge of his own vulnerability, his own brokenness. For the first time, Adam and Eve felt exposed. They looked at each other, and shame washed over them like a flood. They were naked, but now, instead of seeing it as a symbol of their innocence and purity, they felt ashamed of their nakedness. They hastily gathered fig leaves and sewed them together to cover themselves, their hearts pounding with confusion and guilt. What had they done? The garden, which had once been their home, now felt foreign to them. The trees seemed to cast darker shadows, and the air, once filled with the peaceful songs of birds, now felt heavy and oppressive. Adam and Eve's hearts were filled with fear for the first time in their lives. As they sat beneath a tree, trying to hide from the world and from each other, they heard a sound that filled them with dread. It was the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, just as he always had. But this time, instead of rushing to meet him, Adam and Eve felt an overwhelming urge to hide. They crouched behind a thicket of trees, their hearts racing as they tried to escape his presence. But they could not hide from God, who knows all and sees all. "Adam, where are you?" God called out, his voice echoing through the garden. Adam, trembling with fear and shame, stepped out from behind the trees. His eyes were downcast, and his heart was heavy with the weight of what he had done. "I heard you in the garden," Adam said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." God's voice was filled with sorrow as he asked, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam's heart sank even further. The guilt was too much to bear, and in his desperation, he shifted the blame. "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." God turned to Eve, his gaze filled with both sorrow and disappointment. "What is this you have done?" Eve, too, was filled with shame. She had never known fear or guilt until this moment, and now it consumed her. In her confusion, she also sought to place the blame elsewhere. "The serpent deceived me," she said, "and I ate." The perfect harmony of Eden was broken. The moment Adam and Eve disobeyed God, sin entered the world, and with it came consequences that would ripple through all of creation, affecting not just Adam and Eve, but every human being that would come after them. God's voice was filled with grief as he spoke to the serpent first. "Because you have done this," he said, "cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, he will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This was the first glimmer of hope in a now darkened world. Though the serpent had succeeded in bringing about the fall, God's words held a promise of redemption. One day, the offspring of the woman would defeat the serpent, crushing its head and bringing an end to its reign of deceit. Next, God turned to Eve. "I will make your pains in childbearing very severe," he said. "With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." Eve's role as the mother of humanity would now come with great sorrow and suffering. What had once been a world of ease and joy was now tainted by the pain of sin. Finally, God spoke to Adam. "Because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are and to dust you will return." The earth itself was cursed because of Adam's sin. What had once been a garden of effortless abundance would now require hard labor. The ground would resist him, bringing forth thorns and thistles instead of fruit. And worst of all, death had entered the world. Adam and Eve, who had been created to live forever, were now destined to return to the dust from which they had been made. Though God's heart was filled with sorrow for what had happened, he knew that Adam and Eve could no longer remain in the Garden of Eden. The world had changed, and they could not live in perfect harmony with creation while carrying the burden of sin. Even worse, if they were to eat from the tree of life now, they would live forever in their fallen state, separated from Him. So, with a heavy heart, God made garments of skin for Adam and Eve, clothing them with more than just the fig leaves they had sewn together in their shame. This was a profound act, for the garments symbolized God's continued care for them, even though they had disobeyed Him. But it also meant that for the first time, an animal had to die, an early foreshadowing of the sacrifices that would come to cover the sins of humanity. Once Adam and Eve were clothed, God said, "The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever." And so, the painful decision was made to banish them from the garden. God led them to the edge of Eden, to the place where the lush beauty of the garden met the wild, untamed world beyond. There, God sent them out to walk the ground from which Adam had been formed. As they looked back at the garden, they realized they could never return. The peaceful sanctuary that had once been their home was lost to them. To ensure that they could not re-enter and eat from the tree of life, God placed cherubim, angelic beings, at the east of the garden. With them, He stationed a flaming sword that flashed back and forth, guarding the way to the tree. The cherubim stood as both protectors and reminders of the separation between humanity and the paradise they had lost. Now outside the garden, Adam and Eve found themselves in a harsh and unforgiving world. The ground, which had once yielded its fruit freely, was now hard and dry. Thorns and thistles sprang up where there had once been only beauty and abundance. The sun, which had once been a gentle warmth on their skin, now beat down harshly upon them as they toiled in the fields, trying to coax life from the barren soil. The work was grueling, and their hearts were heavy with the knowledge of what they had lost. No longer did they walk with God in the cool of the day. The constant presence of His love and guidance that they had taken for granted was now a distant memory, replaced by the toil and hardship of their new reality. Eve, who had once known only joy and peace, now felt the weight of the curse in her body. As she bore children, the pain of childbirth was severe, just as God had said. Yet, in the midst of that pain, there was still hope. The children she brought into the world were a sign that life would continue, even in this fallen state. Each new life was a reminder of God's promise that one day, her offspring would crush the head of the serpent. Wait, don't go yet. If you know you love God and you love this video, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comment section below and share this video to your friends and family. Don't watch alone, guys, share it. Cause you know sharing is caring and caring is loving, and of course loving is godly, and most importantly, please subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.